History celebrates genius for its brilliance. The discoveries, the revolutions in thought, the masterpieces that changed the course of human history. Yet behind those shining achievements often lies a quieter, darker reality: solitude. The very minds that stretched the limits of human possibility were also those most estranged from life's simplest joys: love, belonging, and companionship. Genius elevates, but it also isolates. This paradox arises because the genius mind rarely moves at the same pace as the world around it. While others take comfort in the ordinary rhythms of conversation, relationships, and shared experience, the genius often dwells in abstraction, lost in questions and visions that few can follow. Their passion for truth, creation, or invention can consume them so fully that intimacy becomes a distant second. To love deeply requires presence, but to create profoundly often demands absence. From society, from convention, even from those closest to them. Moreover, intelligence sharpens perception in ways that can make connection more difficult. To see reality with piercing clarity is to notice hypocrisies, illusions, and trivialities that others depend on to feel secure. What is playful banter to most may feel hollow to someone who is always thinking in depths. What brings joy to many might seem fleeting or meaningless to a mind obsessed with permanence and significance. The result is a subtle estrangement. While surrounded by people, the genius often feels alone, unseen, or misunderstood. History provides countless reminders. Nietzsche, whose philosophy reshaped the way we think about morality, spent much of his life in painful isolation. Nikola Tesla, who gave the world alternating current, died in poverty, alone in a hotel room, feeding pigeons as his only companions. Emily Dickinson, who revolutionized poetry with her piercing insights, lived much of her life in reclusion. These figures show us that the very light of their minds, the brilliance we revere, cast shadows across their own ability to share in ordinary love. This is the tragedy of brilliance. It can illuminate the path for humanity while leaving its bearer in profound darkness. Genius is often too sharp for comfort, too demanding for romance, too restless for stability. It gives the world breakthroughs, but denies the individual a sense of belonging. And so, woven through the legacy of human advancement is a hidden truth, that the minds who lifted civilization upward often bore the heavy weight of solitude. Nikola Tesla dreamed of a world connected by invisible energy long before anyone else could imagine it. Alternating current, wireless transmission, and futuristic visions flowed from his mind like lightning. But while his ideas electrified the world, his personal life remained dim. Tesla lived in paradox. He was surrounded by crowds in New York, yet deeply alone. He dazzled investors and entertained luminaries like Mark Twain, yet returned to empty hotel rooms each night. His brilliance made him magnetic, but intimacy remained out of reach. The same relentless focus that allowed him to glimpse the future left little room for the present, especially for love. Tesla once confessed that invention demanded all of him, that marriage or romance would dilute the intensity required for discovery. To him, devotion to a partner meant betrayal of his mission. He believed, perhaps tragically, that great breakthroughs required sacrifice, and intimacy was the first offering laid upon the altar of genius. His words, "I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men," were not mere observation, but self-justification, a declaration of the life he chose and the love he forfeited. In place of human companionship, Tesla cultivated rituals of solitude. He dined alone at the same restaurants, walked the streets in meticulous routines, and found companionship in pigeons, which he fed and cared for with tenderness. One bird in particular, a white pigeon he loved deeply, became a symbol of the intimacy he denied himself with people. He once admitted that he loved this pigeon as a man loves a woman, and when it died, he said, "Something went out of my life." Tesla's story illustrates the cruel trade-off between obsession and connection. His inventions changed the course of civilization, yet his own life remained incomplete, marked by loneliness and longing. He gave humanity the gift of light, but in his own heart, shadows remained. For Tesla, intimacy was not simply absent. It was the price of invention, a sacrifice he believed necessary to unleash the power of his mind. And so, Tesla's legacy reminds us of genius's paradox, that to light the world, he extinguished the warmth of companionship, proving that sometimes the brightest sparks burn in the darkest solitude. If Tesla's isolation was born from obsession, Isaac Newton's came from temperament. The man who unveiled the law of gravity and split light into its hidden spectrum lived much of his life in deliberate withdrawal. At Cambridge, he avoided dining halls, choosing instead to eat alone in his quarters, immersed in studies that few could comprehend. Where others found nourishment in conversation, Newton found it in solitude, preferring silence over social chatter. But his solitude was not the gentle quiet of a thinker at peace. It was edged with hostility. Letters and accounts from his peers describe him as irritable, secretive, and fiercely suspicious of others. He guarded his discoveries obsessively, fearing theft or criticism, and when rivals emerged, his genius often sharpened into combat. His disputes with Robert Hooke and Gottfried Leibniz were not minor scholarly disagreements, but prolonged, venomous battles that consumed years of his life. For Newton, rivalry became a way of relating to others, hostility a substitute for intimacy. Unlike Tesla, who sacrificed love for invention, Newton seemed incapable of seeking love at all. He never married, never fathered children, and left behind no trace of romance in his personal writings. Friendships, too, were rare and fragile. He held people at a distance, preferring the certainty of mathematics to the unpredictability of human bonds. To Newton, the human heart was more inscrutable than the cosmos, and perhaps less worthy of his effort. By the end of his life, Newton was revered as a legend. President of the Royal Society, Master of the Mint, knighted by Queen Anne. His place in history was secure, but his place among people was tenuous. Contemporaries remembered him less as a warm colleague and more as a solitary, mistrustful figure whose brilliance was matched only by his inability to connect. Newton revealed the hidden laws of nature, showing humanity the order that underlies the universe. Yet in his own life, he found little harmony, little companionship, little peace. His story illustrates another face of genius's loneliness, not the sacrifice of intimacy, but the incapacity for it. In the grandeur of his discoveries, he found immortality. In the realm of human connection, he found only isolation. Unlike Newton, Albert Einstein seemed warm, approachable, even playful. Photographs capture him smiling with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, and countless anecdotes paint him as witty and disarmingly human. He charmed students, entertained friends with his violin, and radiated a genial eccentricity that endeared him to many. Yet beneath this approachable exterior was a man whose personal relationships were turbulent, strained, and often marked by emotional distance. His first marriage to Mileva Maric began as a partnership of shared intellect and passion. Mileva was herself a gifted physicist, and in their early years the two exchanged ideas as equals. But as Einstein's fame grew, that balance collapsed. Their marriage devolved into estrangement and bitterness, crystallized in the cold, contractual rules Einstein imposed, dictating how Mileva should manage the household, avoid intimacy, and expect no affection. What began as a bond of the mind ended as a withering of the heart, culminating in divorce that left scars not only on Mileva, but also on their children. His bond with his sons was equally fraught. With Hans Albert, he was often distant, offering little warmth during crucial years of his upbringing. With Eduard, the tragedy was deeper still. Eduard, who struggled with mental illness, spent much of his life institutionalized. Einstein, unable to bridge the chasm of suffering between them, retreated further into his work. For all his insights into the mysteries of space and time, he found himself helpless before the fragility of his own family. His second marriage to Elsa Einstein, his cousin, provided stability but little passion. It was a marriage of companionship more than love, a practical arrangement that lacked the intensity he reserved for his true devotions, science and music. For Einstein, the most faithful partners were not people but principles. Mathematics gave him clarity, music gave him solace. With his violin in hand, he found harmony that eluded him in human relationships. With his equations, he felt at home in a universe that others could barely glimpse. As he once admitted, he understood the cosmos far better than he understood human beings. Einstein's story reveals a different shade of genius's loneliness. Where Newton withdrew out of suspicion and Tesla sacrificed love for invention, Einstein longed for connection, but often failed to sustain it. He illuminated the secrets of the universe, but in the realm of intimacy, his brilliance faltered. It is the paradox of a man who gave humanity relativity, yet struggled to hold together the fragile bonds of his own family. A reminder that genius can make the universe legible while leaving the human heart a mystery. Virginia. Woolf revolutionized literature, reshaping the modern novel with works like Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. She pioneered a new way of writing, the stream of consciousness that peeled back the surface of life to expose the inner currents of thought and feeling. Through her words, she illuminated the fragile, shifting nature of the human soul with unmatched clarity. Yet behind this brilliance was a woman burdened by a mind too heavy to carry and too expansive to fully share. Woolf lived in cycles of light and shadow. Periods of luminous creativity alternated with devastating plunges into despair, what we would now likely call bipolar disorder. She could perceive beauty with extraordinary sharpness, but that same heightened sensitivity left her vulnerable to anguish that few could understand. Even in the midst of the Bloomsbury Group, an inner circle of artists, writers, and thinkers, she often felt alone, her insights too piercing, her inner world too fragile for ordinary companionship to ease. Her marriage to Leonard Woolf offered her a rare kind of love, patient, steady, unwavering. He devoted himself to her care, standing by her through her breakdowns, encouraging her work, and managing the publishing house that carried her novels to the world. Yet even his deep devotion could not dissolve the solitude she felt within. Leonard gave her structure, but he could not relieve the existential weight that pressed on her mind. For Woolf, intimacy was not absent, it was insufficient. Love could surround her, but it could not silence the voices of despair. Her writing became both her salvation and her undoing. To write was to pour her mind onto the page, to give shape to the chaos within. But each book also took an immense toll, draining her spirit and heightening her fragility. Her brilliance was inseparable from her torment, each feeding the other in an endless cycle. She wrote about time, memory, and the fleeting nature of being with an honesty so sharp it cut into her own life. In March 1941, after another devastating relapse, Woolf filled her pockets with stones and walked into the River Reuss. In her farewell letter to Leonard, she thanked him for giving her the greatest possible happiness, but confessed she could no longer endure the battle inside her mind. Her death was the tragic end of a life that had given the world immense beauty, but at the cost of her own peace. Virginia Woolf's story is perhaps the most haunting expression of genius's loneliness. Unlike Newton's hostility or Tesla's sacrifice, Woolf's solitude was born from the unbearable weight of perception itself. She revealed life's beauty and fragility with unmatched brilliance, yet could not escape the fragility within her own soul. Her legacy endures as both a triumph of art and a reminder that sometimes the greatest minds bear the heaviest burdens. Emily Dickinson is remembered today as one of America's greatest poets, Yet during her lifetime, she lived in near total seclusion. In her later years, she rarely left the family home in Amherst. She dressed in white, avoided social gatherings, and often spoke to visitors from behind a closed door, her presence more felt than seen. To her neighbors, she seemed almost ghost-like, withdrawn, elusive, a woman who turned her back on the world. But Dickinson had not abandoned life. She had simply relocated it. While her physical existence shrank into the confines of her home, her inner life expanded into vast, uncharted territory. In solitude, she built an immense universe of words. She wrote nearly 1,800 poems, exploring the deepest mysteries of existence: life and death, love and longing, eternity and the divine. What she could not, or would not, say in conversation, she poured into her verse with startling candor and precision. Her relationships, too, were shaped by distance. Though she avoided public life, she maintained intense correspondences with friends, mentors, and fellow writers. These letters reveal a mind aflame with wit, affection, and philosophical daring. Yet even these connections were safer at a remove, preserved in ink rather than tested face-to-face. For Dickinson, intimacy was not measured in shared meals or casual touch, but in the communion of thought across the page. The paradox of her life is stark. She was invisible in person, yet immortal in poetry, profoundly alone, yet eternally connected through her art. The world she avoided in life would come to embrace her after death, when her poems were discovered and published. What she withheld from the drawing rooms of Amherst, she offered to future generations in lines of compressed brilliance. Emily Dickinson's solitude was not merely a retreat, but a choice, a radical reorientation of intimacy away from people and into language itself. She showed that one can live unseen, yet leave behind a legacy that allows countless others to feel profoundly seen. Her life reminds us that loneliness is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is the crucible in which timeless beauty is forged. Few thinkers reshaped philosophy as deeply as Friedrich Nietzsche. With a pen like a blade, he dismantled the pillars of Western thought, challenging morality, religion, and even the notion of meaning itself. He declared that God is dead, not as triumph, but as lament, forcing humanity to confront the abyss where certainty once lived. His ideas unsettled not only society at large, but also those closest to him. Brilliance, for Nietzsche, came at the cost of belonging. His personal life was marked by relentless isolation. Tormented by chronic illness, migraines, failing eyesight, and physical pain that left him bedridden for weeks, Nietzsche often wandered Europe alone, drifting from one boarding house to another. He longed for intimacy, but love eluded him. His proposal to Lou Andreas Salome, the brilliant intellectual who inspired him, was rejected, leaving him wounded and humiliated. Friendships too fell away. His once deep bond with composer Richard Wagner dissolved into bitter estrangement, a rift that left Nietzsche adrift without his closest ally. As his thought grew more radical, his exile deepened. Even among intellectuals, his vision was too searing, too unsettling. He rejected conventions so thoroughly that few dared to stand beside him. The loneliness was not simply circumstantial, it was the inevitable consequence of a mind that saw further than others were prepared to follow. His writings became letters from exile, dispatches from a man standing on the edge of thought, watching the world retreat behind him. In his final years, madness overtook him. After a collapse in Turin in 1889, Nietzsche never regained clarity. His once brilliant voice fell silent, leaving him dependent on his sister Elizabeth, who both cared for and distorted his legacy. When he died in 1900, it was in obscurity, misunderstood, and nearly forgotten. And yet, after death, his words erupted into influence, fueling revolutions in philosophy, literature, psychology, and art. What had made him an outcast in life became the very reason he became immortal. Nietzsche's story is a haunting reminder that the pursuit of truth can be so radical, so uncompromising, that it exiles even the most brilliant minds from human warmth. He revealed the abyss beneath human certainty, but in doing so, he fell into one of his own. Ludwig van Beethoven, the towering genius behind the Ninth Symphony and the Moonlight Sonata, lived a life defined by a cruel paradox. A composer who could not hear. As his deafness grew, it stripped him not only of sound, but of the ordinary pleasures of life. Laughter, conversation, casual companionship. The intimacy of human presence became increasingly alien, leaving him confined to the solitude of his own mind. Yet from this silence emerged music that would echo through eternity. Beethoven's genius transformed suffering into transcendent sound. He felt vibrations through the floor, through wood, through his own body, translating despair, longing, and joy into symphonies that spoke directly to the human spirit. In a way, music became his language, his companion, and his confessor. While words often failed him, notes could carry what he could not express in conversation. His letters revealed the depth of his loneliness. He confessed moments of despair, bitterness, and even suicidal thoughts, lamenting that deafness had robbed him of the company of men. Yet every note he composed became a lifeline, a bridge from isolation to immortality. Through music, Beethoven communicated with the world in a way that ordinary speech never could. The tragedy of Beethoven's life was that the world could hear his soul more clearly than the people beside him ever could. Friends and patrons might visit, but they could never fully penetrate the fortress of solitude he built around himself. Still, his isolation became the engine of creation, producing music of such depth and universality that it transcends time and space. Beethoven's story is a profound testament to the paradox of genius. The very condition that isolates him, his deafness, his inner torment, also becomes the source of his immortality. Through silence, he created sound. Through solitude, he created connection. And through his genius, humanity hears a voice that he himself could no longer fully share with those nearest to him. The loneliness of history's greatest minds is not evidence of emotional deficiency. On the contrary, many geniuses felt more deeply than those around them, loved more intensely, and longed for human connection with a ferocity that ordinary lives rarely demand. Yet brilliance carries with it traits that can build invisible walls between the mind and the world, leaving even the most capable human beings profoundly isolated. Geniuses perceive layers of reality that escape most people. Their conversations naturally drift toward mortality, morality, truth, and meaning, topics too weighty for ordinary discourse. While others speak of weather, gossip, or trivialities, the mind of a genius probes the universe's hidden patterns and the human condition's raw edges. This difference in perspective can make ordinary interactions feel shallow, leaving the genius alienated even in crowds. Awareness can be a burden as much as a gift. Where most find comfort in routine and distraction, the perceptive mind notices life's fractures, the injustices, the impermanence, the fragility that others often ignore. This heightened sensitivity fosters insight, but also anxiety, grief, and a sense of separation. To see the world clearly is to see the suffering and absurdity that everyone else manages to overlook, a truth that can feel unbearable when born alone. Geniuses crave depth in their connections. They seek resonance in thought, passion, and emotion, unwilling to settle for the superficial. But such relationships are rare. The intensity of a brilliant mind can overwhelm ordinary companions, leaving the genius trapped between the desire for intimacy and the scarcity of people capable of sustaining it. Friendships and love become precarious, precious, and often fleeting. Intellectual brilliance often comes paired with relentless self-analysis. Every word, every gesture, every choice is dissected and scrutinized. Protective walls are erected, not out of disdain for others, but as a shield against disappointment, misunderstanding, and vulnerability. Yet these same walls that guard the mind can prevent genuine intimacy, leaving the genius both protected and profoundly alone. Ultimately, the intertwining of genius and loneliness is a paradox. It is not the absence of emotion that isolates these minds, but the presence of too much perception, too much intensity, and too much awareness. The very traits that allow them to illuminate the world, insight, creativity, curiosity, and depth, also set them apart from it. In the end, genius can bring both extraordinary achievement and profound solitude, a reminder that brilliance and companionship, while not mutually exclusive, are rarely easy bedfellows. From Newton to Wolfe, from Tesla to Beethoven, the story repeats itself across centuries. The minds that pierced the veils of reality and revealed the deepest truths about humanity often struggled to inhabit those truths themselves. They mapped the laws of the cosmos, reshaped literature, invented the engines of modern life, and composed music that transcends time. But when it came to the delicate, ordinary intimacies of life, they were often strangers. They gave the world knowledge, beauty, and vision, yet bore a loneliness invisible to those around them. The tragedy of brilliance lies not in their achievements, but in the cost exacted by the very faculties that produced them. The heightened perception, relentless curiosity, and fierce dedication that illuminate human possibility also isolate the individual. Insight, when untethered from understanding hearts and social rhythms, can become a gilded cage. They grasped the infinite, yet missed the comforting hand of companionship. They perceived the universe's secrets, yet struggled to decode the simplest expressions of human affection. Perhaps this is the ultimate paradox of genius: to illuminate the path for others while walking it alone, to reveal the universe's mysteries, yet remain a stranger to life's simplest joy: being seen, being understood, being loved. In their solitude, brilliance shines brighter for the world, but casts long shadows on the life of its bearer. And yet, there is a haunting beauty in this paradox. Their isolation, their suffering, their struggle to connect often becomes the very force that shapes their greatness. Out of silence, they compose symphonies. Out of solitude, they write immortal words. Out of obsessive focus, they invent what others could not imagine. Loneliness is not a failure, but a companion of vision, a silent witness to the human mind's capacity to touch eternity. The tragedy of brilliance is inseparable from its triumph. Genius and loneliness are two sides of the same coin. One lights the world, the other bears the weight of that light in quiet solitude. And perhaps, in acknowledging this truth, we glimpse not only the cost of genius, but the extraordinary depth of the human spirit itself.